Hello and welcome to episode 171 of the Colby Cast, your place for community and conversation about pop culture and storytelling. And on this episode, Luke and I are going to talk about Deadpool and Wolverine because we saw it just a couple days ago and we got to get our thoughts out of our brain and onto the internet. So, hey, Luke, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. Excited to talk about this movie. And I also want to get to some of the Marvel San Diego Comic Con news because there was some really big news that came out, but we'll do that after, sort of as we move past Deadpool and Wolverine and into the the future of the MCU. We'll go ahead and tag that conversation onto the end of this episode. So Deadpool and Wolverine, before we get to the movie, I know that you in your life have been a pretty big fan of the character of Deadpool. I remember when the movie first came out, the first movie, I believe it was 2015, and if memory serves correctly, we were on a um, a hockey uh, tournament trip, and it may have been when we went to Dallas and we saw the movie in Dallas. Is that does that line up with your memory too?
I don't remember my first time seeing Deadpool, but if you say so, I believe you.
Well, I can fill in those gaps because I just remember you were 14 at the time, and I'm not sure mom knew what we were getting into when we went to go watch that movie. And I, as a dad, I was like, always a little bit worried with you being as much of a fan of Deadpool as you were, just because he's so raunchy. But at the same time, I know you. You're my son. I know what kind of a brain you have, and I don't. There are some 20-year-olds that shouldn't have seen that movie, and then some 14-year-olds that were just fine seeing. And I think you were just fine seeing that movie. It didn't have any lasting impacts, as far as I can tell. Um, but tell us a little bit about your fandom with the character and then your experience with the first couple of Deadpool movies before we get into this one.
I don't really remember my first time getting into Deadpool. I know that I had been a fan because I had read a lot of the comics, and then I started getting more into like the YouTube video explanations of the character and the comics and stuff like that. So that helped me bridge the gap a little bit between the incredibly expansive comic book stories and then what I was actually able to retain. Um, and then just seeing him in, he had been in a couple things like there were a couple shows you had seen him in. I remember seeing him in a Spider-Man show. I can't remember exactly which one. Um, and just stuff like that. And I liked him because he was so different. I always liked more grounded characters whose superpowers are a little bit more tame. You know, Captain America, Spider Man, or even characters like Batman who are just purely relying on their skill. And even though Deadpool is a mutant and is very powerful, he's not like a world breaking Hulk or Superman or something like that. So I gravitated to him because of that. And then once you start to understand who he is as a character and his personality, there's nobody like him.
You can say that again. That's a really good way of Deadpool. There's nobody like him. That is very accurate. I sort of referenced it already, but when you were younger and I saw how much you enjoyed the character, I didn't, I don't. I've said it before, and I'll repeat it just in case anybody hasn't heard me say it. I don't have really any roots in comics. I didn't read comics growing up. I don't have any attachments to any of these storylines or characters. My attachment from for Marvel characters and Marvel movies is all really the MCU and the X-Men movies, the Spider-Man movies, uh, Fantastic Four movies, which we'll talk a little bit about. But yeah, I don't. But I knew enough about Deadpool and really what you were telling me about him to be like, wow, this character is a little bit concerning for me as a dad. I'm gonna wait and see how this goes. How does my 12, 13, 14-year old kid, how does he consume this character being as raunchy and unorthodox as he is? But it all worked out. It was okay. Um,
I think particularly him breaking the fourth wall was something that nobody else could do. He's very unique in a lot of ways. You know, his regeneration factor and his inability to die, that's pretty rare. And then being as witty and raunchy as he is, that's a whole other thing that not many other characters have. But him breaking the fourth wall is truly unique. And he I remember the comic that really got me into him was Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe. And it's a dark comic. It really is. It's not easy to watch, but or not easy to read, but um, in it he goes through and kills the majority of the MCU, and then comes to life and kills his authors. And that's such a like interesting, weird way to tell a story, but it's just so unique.
Again, another good way of putting it, unique. And I remember, 10 years ago, you telling me about this comic and sort of dying a little bit on the inside, thinking to myself, oh my gosh, what is this? What is this character that my newly teenage son is obsessing over and going around killing, murdering, maiming, not just only, video villains, I mean, in comics, but also heroes, and thinking, yeah, that was a little bit of a challenge for me. And I remember trying to be, walk the line between being a responsible parent, and presenting the other side of how that may not be a ton of fun, but also at the same time allowing you or encouraging you to be, to explore things that you were interested in. Thankfully, that I don't think that scarred you mentally. Maybe me a little bit, but I think I think it was all right. Um, so you go back a long way with Deadpool. What about Wolverine, the other side of this title? What are your thoughts on the character, Hugh Jackman? And also, before we get to Wolverine, um, you also are a pretty big Ryan Reynolds fan, right?
Yeah, I had already liked Ryan Reynolds. Um, I thought it was a match made in heaven before the movie was even, an idea, just because the the connection between Wolverine being Canadian or Deadpool being Canadian, Wolverine is too, I think. But Deadpool being Canadian, Ryan Reynolds being Canadian, them, you know, being similar in how sporadic and chaotic they are. I had already liked him, and then the connection was made in my head. So when he was cast, it was just perfect. Um, with Wolverine, my real introduction to him was the X-Men movies, and I liked them. I always thought Hugh Jackman did a good job, but I was never super into those movies. I had liked DC more than I liked Marvel, and that included X-Men characters. Um, so I didn't have a huge attachment to Wolverine or Hugh Jackman really until Logan, because when Logan came out, I had already started to like him more and more as the newer X-Men movies came out, like First Class and Days of Future Past, stuff like that. But really, once Logan came out, that solidified Hugh Jackman as a top tier actor for that character, the same way Chris Evans is for Captain America and Robert Downey Jr. is for Iron Man and stuff like that. So I've always liked him, but Wolverine as a character to me was never really in my top five. I wasn't, one of those people demanding justice for Wolverine because, his other movies weren't great.
That's a good segue into sort of the conversation about the X-Men Fox movies, because it makes sense that you wouldn't have too much of an attachment to Wolverine, because those movies came out, well, the first one came out before you were even born. And that trilogy, that first trilogy, where really it was X-Men and the Wolverine, really, because he quickly became sort of the face of that franchise. Whether people liked that or not, he was the guy, right? Like, even I think it's even referenced in this movie. Like, Deadpool calls him, "You were the X-Man," and that's true. So the three of those movies were done by 2006. So you were young, you weren't watching those movies. But then, you get into the First Class, which you were by that time about 10 years old, and older. So I think that you probably have more of an attachment. And he wasn't as big of a part of that franchise as he was with the first, except for Days of Future Past, of course. He was central to that, and I still think that's really one of the best X-Men movies out there. Before we move on, though, I have to ask you: do you remember watching, or do you have any thoughts on X-Men Origins Wolverine? Because that's technically the first movie where we'll say Logan and Wade Wilson appeared together. Because I'm not sure we ever saw Deadpool in that movie, but we saw Wade Wilson.
I actually liked the movie. I haven't seen it in a while, to be fair, so I really don't know if it ages well, but I remember liking it. Um, I didn't like what they did to Wade Wilson. Thought that was terrible. That was heresy. Um, but yeah, I liked it. I thought the action was really good. I thought the performance by Hugh Jackman was good. Um, and I remember it sort of reigniting my flame for Deadpool because you knew it was Wade Wilson, it was Ryan Reynolds. Um, he was, superbly skilled with his swords, the way the Deadpool is, and I just thought, like, yeah, you can do this. If you decide to go the route of getting a real Deadpool, it's possible that this could succeed. So I think that sort of made me most interested in it. But I thought that Hugh Jackman did a great job in it, so it sort of helped me enjoy Wolverine a little bit more.
Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson is in that movie for probably 5 minutes, and it's really only. Go ahead.
It's a good 5 minutes.
It is a good 5 minutes, and that's the thing. And I think without that, I saw someone or heard someone or read something that presented an idea that was so intriguing to me, because so many people have a tough time with that movie, X-Men Wolverine, Origins Wolverine. It, like you said, Hugh does a great job. It's an interesting story. I would love it for you to go back and rewatch that movie and tell me what your thoughts are on it now. Because as watching it as a 10-year-old, I can see why you would have been like, "Oh yeah, this is cool." Watching it though now, where you're at as in your mid 20s, especially with your affinity for writing, of course I have to bring that up because I always love to. Um, I have to hear your more modern thoughts on it. So maybe if you have an hour and a half to sit down and watch it, you should.
I'm definitely interested in doing it because I rewatched Deadpool, um, the first one, before we watched the most recent Deadpool and Wolverine, and I think I want to go through and watch Deadpool 2, and then a couple more of the Wolverine movies.
So in so since you brought that up, in preparation for Deadpool and Wolverine, I watched X-Men the original, X2. Then I watched X-Men Origins Wolverine just because I wanted to suffer a little bit and get my memory refreshed on whether I remembered that movie properly, and I did, because they just absolutely do Deadpool terrible. And then I finished off with Logan. That was my prep for Deadpool Wolverine. But to finish my thought on the the purpose that Origin serves, I don't know that if that movie never happened, I'm not sure that we get the Deadpool trilogy that we have now, because that was the entry point with Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson. And I don't know that there's a better actor to play this character, to be quite honest. And you can add Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans. You can add Scarlett Johansson to that list. You can add, there's this handful of characters that are just iconic with their actors. And if it weren't for that Origins movie, then maybe we don't get the Deadpool that we have now. So it served its purpose, and I'm glad that it exists, even though at the time it sort of sunk. If I'm remembering correctly, it sunk the Fox mutant movies. People were just like, "What just happened with this? Is really bad." Um, but yeah, so I watched those movies to prepare. Um, I would I would recommend that you go back and watch like an X-Men marathon, because I really enjoyed watching the first couple X-Men. And then it sort of goes off the rail. I sort of want to go back and watch the first class movies. I never ended up watching Dark Phoenix or New Mutants, because that was around the time that Disney started talking about buying Fox, and I didn't see the point in it. And I don't remember Apocalypse at all.
I haven't seen either of those three movies. Um, Dark Phoenix, New Mutants, or Apocalypse.
I watched Apocalypse, but I forgot about it. All right, so that's enough of that. Let's get into that's setting the table. We're ready. We're up to Deadpool and Wolverine. I'd love to hear just your general thoughts, overall thoughts, and I guess I'll give the spoiler warning now. We're just going to get into it. We're going to get into spoilers for Deadpool and Wolverine. So if you haven't quite seen the movie, go out and watch it, because I would highly, highly recommend watching it in theaters, and actually a full theater, if I may go as far as to say that. So buy the whole theater and pack it with your friends. And yeah, we're going to talk spoilers, Deadpool, Wolverine, from this point on. So Luke, what did you think of the movie?
I loved it. I will go as far as to say that it had the greatest opening act of any Marvel movie ever.
Wow, give me some specifics on that. Opening act, like up until what point?
I don't really know. Um, I know there's like typically three acts in a movie, but I remember the first, just, I don't know, let's say 30% of the movie. I loved it. I loved every second of it. I loved the first scene with him just butchering TVA agents with Wolverine's skeleton. Um, I loved when he met Happy and was trying out for the Avengers and kept calling him the driver. I loved it. I thought it was amazing. I do. I'm curious to see how this movie is going to, how it's going to carry. Movies like this tend to do well initially just because of the shock factor, and I think with the general public not being overly pleased with Marvel, a lot of people are just going to be happy that this is different. Um, but we'll see once the shock factor goes away. I still think that it's going to be this caliber of a movie because it's that good.
The more I become separated from it, the more I like it, and I loved it from the start. So if that makes any sense whatsoever, but sort of to comment on your comment there at the end, I think like this is an event movie that's going to have legs. It's made over $200 million already, um, domestically. That's just in the U.S. Worldwide, I'll have to look up the number because I don't know. And we're recording this on Sunday, so who knows what it's going to do today, but it's blowing up the box office. So it's an event film, and I think you're right. I think people are going to go back and watch it, and it's going to make a lot of money. I hope it makes $1 billion. I think it deserves to make $1 billion, because to sort of share my overall thoughts on it, um I I like this movie. This is my favorite Marvel movie since No Way Home. And I know that we've been through some pretty clunky Phase 4 and Phase 5 movies, but there's been good, decent shows, uh, movies in that phase.
There's been a decent show.
What's a decent show?
Loki.
Yeah, Loki is good. I've
Loki
liked the
was
show.
good. There were a couple decent ones.
I don't think that Phase 4 and 5 have been nearly as strong as what we saw in the Infinity Saga, but I'm not I have not jumped off the Marvel bus like other people have. I've stuck with it because I really enjoy the form of storytelling. But Deadpool and Wolverine, I was excited to go watch. More excited than I think, uh, to see this movie than any other movie since No Way Home, just because of the potential of what it could do. And I you know me, I don't like to go in with expectations, but I think it hit every note that it needed to hit. There were a couple things that I was just like, okay, this is fun, and we'll get to those in a second. But overall, I think it did a marvelous job. No pun intended. I did want to share that the trailers, and I cut off all of my consumption of Deadpool and Wolverine media about a month before the movie came out. Like I didn't want to see any of the commercials. I know they dropped like a final trailer a week before the movie came out, and I basically missed out on all the press tour because I didn't want to be spoiled by anything, even by accident, even minor things. I had seen what I wanted to see through the first two trailers, and I didn't want to see any more. So I cut myself off from that. Now I've gone back and sort of rewatched a lot of it, and it's been fun. So my point in bringing all of that up is that the marketing that I saw leading up to it, like the Super Bowl commercial and the second trailer, I think it leaned more into, hey, Deadpool's about to enter the MCU, like that angle. I don't know if you got that same feeling, but I felt like they were preparing us for like, hey, he's talking about it. He's Marvel Jesus, et cetera, et cetera. They're showing him watching the TVA videos of like Captain America and Hulk and the Avengers clips and that stuff. So it was much more about like Deadpool's entering the MCU. But I don't think that that's what this movie ended up being. And I think that it was fun and the right thing to do to hide the fact that this is more of a tribute to the Fox X-Men movies and the Fox Mutant movies. Did you sort of get that same feeling? Because this was much more Fox heavy and mutant heavy than it was MCU heavy. Did you agree with that?
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think um, it was enough Marvel to get the Marvel fans to come, and even some of the people who jumped off the Marvel bandwagon to come back. They showed Happy. They talked about sending him to the sacred timeline, yada yada yada. But you're right. That's sort of where it stopped, and they talked a lot about. I guess having the TVA heavily involved was a big thing too. Um, but everything else was pretty Fox centric. I mean, even having stuff like Gambit and other mutants in it, Cassandra Nova being a mutant, stuff like that. I think that sort of made it more Fox centric. Um, but it didn't feel like a Fox movie really, and it also didn't really feel like a Marvel movie. It sort of felt like something new and something different.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to get to some of the cameos and some of the characters and stuff, but I really enjoyed the aspect of it because the Fox aspect, the mutant aspect, because I did watch those movies and I did enjoy those movies up to a certain point until I think the MCU sort of like gobbled everything up. And then, of course, 4, 5, 6 years ago, they bought Fox and haven't integrated the mutants quite yet up to this point. But the way that Disney has decided to sort of like give a little bit of honor and tribute to those characters and to that time, I think was super cool and a nice way to sort of cap that off. In the same way that I feel like they did justice to the Sony Spider-Man characters in No Way Home. And, if you would have asked me 5 years ago if I would have wanted to have seen all the X-Men, characters that we had seen from 2000 till this point with MCU characters, my gosh, I would have jumped at that chance, and I think anybody else would have. So now we actually have that, and to a certain extent, and boy, that's just it just blows my mind because I have spent a lot of time in the early 2000s and 20 teens really following a lot of this MCU and Marvel movie stuff. So I just remember like really enjoying like the San Diego Comic-Con panels and chomping at the bit for like what's coming up next in the mutant front. And Spider-Man has been sort of a mess except for the when they started sharing the character back with Marvel. And in that way I felt like it was really unique, and this and No Way Home may be two of the most unique and almost meta star like superhero movies that I've ever seen. This acknowledges like the last 25 years of comic book movies, even going further back because we got a Blade cameo. So 25, 26 years going all the way back to the 90s and bringing it all sort of together on the same
Elektra.
screen. Yeah, and I don't even remember when Elektra and those Daredevil movies came out. I'd have to look it up.
Nobody does. That's the point.
but then in a sense, like they made a big point to talk about like those characters, what they wanted was an ending. I thought that that was really interesting because the character in and of itself is saying, "Hey, we never really got any resolution in the real world, but then also in this Marvel universe, or I should say Marvel multiverse, because they got sent to the void in the TVA." So let's get into that aspect of things. I wanted to ask you about the story first and foremost, because essentially this is Deadpool trying to matter, but really it goes back to the heart of the first movie, which was not just mattering to something, but mattering uh to Vanessa. That's her name, right? Vanessa. Yeah.
Yeah.
He wants to matter to Vanessa, and but in a larger scope he wants to matter, and he's always wanted to be a part of a team. That's a big deal with Deadpool. So the story essentially is him trying to matter, but starting out, I feel like, in a selfish way, to becoming more of a selfless character. What did you think of the story overall?
To be honest, I think the story is probably the weakest part of the show or of the movie. Um,
I
that's not
agree
to
with you.
say that's not to say that it was a bad story. I think everything else was just that good. The story, though, I think the story was good enough. It was a way to get them into the void. It was a way for them to get to the TVA. It made enough sense where you weren't like, why is Wolverine here and how are all these characters involved? It feels like it was just cohesive enough, which is good enough. Um, there were a couple plot holes, and maybe plot holes isn't the right way to say it, but there were a few things that were a little convenient that happened. But if you don't dig too deep into it, it sort of allows you to enjoy the rest of the movie more and to get to the real important stuff.
What do you think? What a couple of those convenient plot points were? Because there was one that I wouldn't call convenient. I would call confusing. But I want to see if the thing I have in my mind um, is the same that you're one of the things you're talking about.
I think the one that you're thinking of is how he got to the sacred timeline in 2018 and interviewed with Happy for the Avengers.
Ding 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 ding. Yes, I was very confused by that. So go ahead.
Yeah, I sort of thought that maybe he just used Cable's time machine or something, but I don't know how that makes him able to travel timelines. But I don't know. I mean, I thought it was just, you know, convenient storytelling to get to the important thing of, you know, he's he's looking for purpose and higher meaning and stuff like that. So I think that that's a good thing. They probably could have made that a little bit more cohesive with the rest of the story, but you only have so much time in a movie, right? Um, then another thing was how he was just able to use one of the temp pads from the TVA. Like he just grabbed it and
Yeah,
then
he's just tapping the screen and it takes him right to where he wants to go.
immediately teleported out of danger and then started jumping around timeline to timeline to timeline. Stuff like that. It was little stuff. I mean, to be honest, it didn't make the movie any worse for me because that's not what the movie's really about. I think the movie's more about, the feel good story of Deadpool and the action and the humor and the dynamic between Wolverine and Deadpool. Um, right at the end, where it whatever that the Time Ripper, it was supposed to like disintegrate whoever was holding it, right? That scene was great. Um, but the fact that the two of them walked out of that unscathed, the only thing they lost was a T-shirt, and then they were just like, "Oh yeah, it would have killed us, but there were two of us." Convenient storytelling, but it's important.
Yeah, I agree with you. The Let me comment on the happy scene because that really confused me, and but I think that it serves a bigger purpose to what your point is, and I agree with your point. This movie is not about the story. Nobody wants this movie to be about the story. This movie is about watching these two characters on screen go on a wild ride and take us with them, and to have fun watching it and spending a couple hours in a theater. Well, more than like almost 3 hours if you're going to choose to include your previews and trailers and all that stuff, and then watching the credits, waiting for that last credit post credit scene. But yeah, nobody's going to see. I'm at least I don't think people are going to see Deadpool and Wolverine and say, blow my mind with the story. The story is the fact that we saw all these characters together, and the action scenes and the chases and the raunchy comedy and the big stunt, um, I guess, choreography again. That's what we're going to see. We're going to have a fun time at the movie, not be blown away by a story. So and I think the happy scene is very indicative of that mindset that I had to quickly adopt, which is stop worrying about categorizing multiverse Earth 616 over Earth 10,005 and why is Deadpool in Earth 616. I just quickly sort of moved on beyond that because I think that it had started to take away from my enjoyment of what was happening on the screen as I was trying to wrap my brain around what had just happened. So um, it's fine. I don't understand it. I don't know if the movie explained that, so I guess it's just another reason to watch the movie. And even if it doesn't matter because the fact of the matter is that he had to go to the next point. He had to somehow stop this time ripper from destroying his reality, which again he wants to save his world. He wants to save his people, which can be viewed as selfless and selfish. But he even called it. He's like, "Oh, that looks like a MacGuffin or something like that." When they introduced the Time Ripper, so even in a weak plot point that they're setting up, they highlight that fact and they make the joke before we can make the joke because he calls it. He like calls it right out. He's like, "There you go. That's what we're going to be chasing the whole movie."
Yeah, and then he even says, like, we're in the home stretch, I promise.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, that's great.
I think this movie he broke the fourth wall less than in the previous two, which I kind of missed, to be honest. Him breaking the fourth wall, it's the most unique part of Deadpool in a whole lot of unique stuff. Um, but I get why he didn't. There was too much going on for him to just randomly take a pause and break the fourth wall as often as he did in the other movies.
I think I agree with you. And I actually thought about that too, about like, oh, he didn't really I can't remember one time where he just like looks into the camera, except for the pegging joke, which I think is still one of the funniest thing, or the soaking wet joke, which is also just raunchy and really makes the inner 14-year-old in me laugh incessantly. Those I remember, but I don't remember many other. And I think it would have been great had they involved Wolverine a little bit in that, like reacting off of him, like, "What are you doing, bub? Like, who are you talking to?" kind of thing. I don't remember anything like that happening, so I think that would have been fun if they had done something like that. But
I agree.
I don't think it takes away from the experience at all. It's just that that's a
I
fun part of the character that they didn't do as much of.
I don't really know the rules of breaking the fourth wall. I think when you break the fourth wall, it's almost sort of like a time pause where like everybody
Mm.
else around you doesn't know that you're breaking the fourth wall.
Oh, I like
Or
that. Sort of cool.
it also works if that's not the case because Deadpool's so weird and sporadic that maybe they just ignore it and they're like, yeah, he's just being weird because he's weird and he does weird stuff.
I want to ask you about the cameos, but I don't want to potentially lose these two characters specifically to a cameo discussion. So I'm going to supersede my cameo question with an opportunity to talk about two characters specifically, and that is X-23 and Johnny Storm, because those are two characters that I was so thrilled were included in these movies. And even though I tried to avoid stuff X-23 was ruined for me because even they put her in the final trailer, which I did not watch, but then I saw people tweeting about the final trailer, and I saw, as much as I tried to avoid it, there's pictures of her at the premiere, and I'm like, oh, so clearly she's going to be in the movie, or else why would she be at the premiere? But that's okay because I love what they did with 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 Laura, and I'll get more details there. But the other thing I wanted to share was Johnny Storm was not spoiled whatsoever. Had no idea Chris Evans was in the movie. Had no idea that he was going to be playing Johnny Storm, and I love the fact that they did that. So, which character do you want to tackle first, Laura or Johnny?
Let's talk about Laura. Let's talk about X-23.
How did you like her usage in the movie, especially with? I know that you're a big fan of Logan, the movie, and rightfully so. So, how did you like the her inclusion in this?
I thought they could have done more with her. I wish they would have done more with her. Um, she sort of seemed like I didn't really know what timeline she came from because they made it seem like she came from Deadpool's timeline,
That's what I got.
um, which doesn't make a ton of sense when you look too deep into it. Um, but I don't know. It is what it is.
Well, she made
Um,
a reference before you continue your thought. She made a reference to lots of kids, uh, which I assumed was the little group of kids that were running towards Canada at the end of Logan. She referenced those kids like being sent to the void or being lost as well. So I just sort of explained that in my brain, like the TVA was going around pruning people that shouldn't be in timelines for whatever reason. The TVA does it, and that they pruned her, and that that's using Loki terminology, right? Because I don't even think they say that word in this movie, pruning. They pruned her, they pruned that group of kids after Logan died. So I looked at her as being the Laura from Logan. So it would have been the same universe from Deadpool, yeah.
yeah, I mean, if that was the case, I would have liked a little bit more explanation as to why that happened because I think that would give a little bit more substance to why there's that connection between Logan and X-23. Um, but the thing is, she's such a good character, and the connection between them two, I would say, is as strong, if not stronger, than the connection between Iron Man and Spider Man, or
Sure, yeah, I could get
or
behind
Captain America and Captain America,
that.
stuff like that. So I would have liked to see a little bit more, but I think she was good. I just feel like that character deserves more.
Well, that sort of leads me to my favorite part about the character, and there's two things. I take it back. There's three things. These are my highlights for Laura. Uh, the fireside chat with Wolverine, where she says, "You were never the right guy until you were the right guy." I think that that is a perfect line to say to Logan because that's his character in a nutshell.
I
He
agree.
was he never was the right guy until he was the right guy, and the fact that she delivered it and sort of gave him that motivation, I thought was perfect. She took down the Juggernaut, bro. So she didn't get a ton of time to shine because that's a massive battle, right? When the outlaws sort of go back for their encounter with Cassandra Nova.
Yeah,
Um, you, that's not easy to do with Juggernaut, and she did it, and she did it in such a satisfying way because, of course, how do you neutralize the Juggernaut? You don't let him move. How do you prevent him from moving? Eh, slice his Achilles or cut off his feet as he's standing. Love
yeah,
it. I love that time that she got to shine. The thing I love the most is that they showed her at the dinner scene at the end. So she's clearly out of the void. I don't know where that leaves Elektra and Gambit and Blade, but that's not. I don't think that's as important. The point is storytelling wise, she's in play. And after the Acolyte did her so dirty, and I'm talking about Daphne Keene, Daphne Keene now has a time to shine for 10, 15 plus years as X-23. And that makes me extremely excited because the character is awesome. Daphne Keene is awesome. And they got it right. They stuck the landing with X-23.
I agree, and I hope they give her a moment in the sun. She earned it. I mean, as as much as Hugh Jackman does for that movie, I mean everybody in that movie is great. Charles Xavier is a huge part of that movie.
Oh
Nobody
yeah,
really
yeah.
talks about it because it's overshined by how much Wolverine means to that movie. But I would say Daphne Keane to X-23 is as important to that movie as anybody.
I agree with you. I agree with you, and especially Daphne Keane because oh my gosh, she absolutely sells it as Laura. Like she's terrifying. She's legitimately terrifying in that scene. Well, I don't want to spoil Logan, but in case someone's listening to a Deadpool and Wolverine podcast and not having seen Logan, but what she does in that movie is brilliant, and I think she goes from a terrifying, almost animalistic killer to a vulnerable child in the same movie in different scenes, and a defiant 12-year-old or however old she was in that movie to like almost like a leader of a group of people. And yeah, it's she's brilliant, and I'm so glad that she made it out of the void, and I really hope that she's included in future stories. We'll see, time will tell. The other one though, let's talk about Johnny Storm. Chris Evans, I was convinced we were getting a Cap cameo, and they did it perfectly, and they gave me the bait, and I took the bait hook, line, and sinker. But then as it started to develop within seconds, I'm realizing, oh no, they're going to give us Johnny Storm.
I
And I thought it
didn't
was perfect.
I didn't get it at all until it was right in front of my face. I I'd like to think of myself as a pretty smart guy, and I read stories pretty well and am able to see where it's going to go. But that one totally caught me off guard. Maybe it was the reaction of the audience and the reaction of Deadpool too that sort of sold me on him being um, Captain America. But I thought it was perfect. I thought it was the perfect way. It was the most Deadpool way of bringing Chris Evans in, where
100%.
it it puts a cupcake in front of your face and says, "Here, have a bite." When you go take a bite, it kicks you in the.
It was there. Did you have another thought on that? I'm sorry. I feel like I laughed over your sentence.
No, no, no. That was it. I liked it.
It was just brilliant. I mean, they show him up on that lift or whatever he's on, and you see his arm, and I either my brain saw just enough red, white, and blue to make me think, "Oh my God, we're getting Captain America." I recognized the voice right when he spoke. I knew it was Evans. You didn't see his face until I think he said "Flame on." Really, down because he had that hood on or whatever. But
Yeah,
yeah, and like you're saying, part of the fun of this movie was Deadpool reacting off of all the cameos. Ryan Reynolds is just that's his wheelhouse. Like he just absolutely kills it.
his comedic timing is just so good. I will. It's not.
It's amazing.
It's their directing that makes the comedic timing, but still, um, I loved the joke about the you have no idea what he was doing to the budget joke. I loved
That was so great.
it's so good. It's so good.
Mom was so upset when he got his skin ripped off of his body and just disintegrated into a clump of organs on the dirt. And then they made the budget joke, and I looked at mom. Mom was so upset with that. I'm just like, he costs too much. That's the joke. She's like, I still don't like it. She wanted more Chris Evans.
I want to
Don't
know
we
how much
all?
Chris Hemsworth got paid for him hugging Deadpool as Thor.
I'd like to know how much time he had to spend in his life just to film that scene, right? Because I mean, you got to go and get your hair put on, you got to get the makeup, you got to get in the right place. He
I
lives
would
in
certainly hope.
Australia.
I would certainly hope it was as simple as a day trip. Like,
I
hey, I'm
hope
in the
so.
area.
Do you know what a flight from Australia to anywhere is? It's a massive undertaking. That's why I
Sure,
don't.
I don't think he spends every day in Australia.
No, whenever he's not filming movie in my brain, he just pops up in Australia. He's like, I got to go home, my home base.
He doesn't own property anywhere else.
He only exists in movie studios or on movie sets or on airplanes or in his home in Australia. He's
You
in a
don't believe in
constant movement between those spaces.
you don't believe in object permanence. You're like a baby where they don't understand that if something isn't in front of them, that it still exists.
I had no idea what object permanence meant before you said that, but let me get my opinion wrapped around that. No, I don't believe in object permanence. No.
Good, me neither.
Okay. Yes, but the Evans cameo, great. The fact that they put him back, because that was, if memory serves me correct, they had the Fantastic Four movies, of course, with him, and Jessica Alba was Susan Storm. I don't remember the actors' names for the other two characters, but that was the original Fantastic Four. They had two movies. People loved Johnny Flame. They didn't really love the movies, but they loved Johnny. Is that his name, Johnny
Storm.
Flame? No, but they call him Johnny Flame too, don't they?
Johnny Storm because he's Sue Storm's brother.
I understand that, but I did read somewhere that somebody called him Johnny Flame, and I thought that that was also a thing. But if it isn't, I stand corrected. Johnny Storm Flame on. They loved Evans doing that, but the movies weren't great. And then they cast Evans as Captain America, and that was like the first time that people sort of lost it and were like, "You can't have the same guy playing two different Marvel characters." which,
Yeah, well, look
which
what
when
happened with that.
well, yeah, we're gonna get to that. But yeah, that was sort of funny to see him being in that role again, and then the way that it all went down, especially with the post credit scene, was magnificent because we're so used to seeing Chris Evans as Steve Rogers. He's the Boy Scout, and I love that part about Steve Rogers. Like he's literally lecturing his Avengers friends about using foul language at the beginning of Age of Ultron, right? Like it was the famous like
Yeah,
language,
that
right?
was the running joke. Yeah.
So then you get Evans, which is, and Chris Evans is not Steve Rogers. Like he's a great guy, seemingly. He helps people upstairs during the Oscars. He does, but he also likes to play edgy characters. So to get him an opportunity just to be just vilely using like the most vile language for about 2 minutes was just an absolute Deadpool thing to do. Full marks for that whole thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know. I feel like I've seen Chris Evans in a lot. And he's a really good actor. He has a really good range, but he's so funny. Like he plays such a serious and honorable role in Captain America that I think a lot of people don't understand. He's a really funny actor. I mean, in Knives Out, he plays the bad guy, and he's hilarious. I mean,
Spoilers for Knives Out, bro. Wow.
if you don't pick up on that, that's on you. But he plays a very unlikable character, but it's funny, and he I just I didn't think it would fit as well as it did. Like it didn't register to me that Chris Evans and Ryan Reynolds riffing off each other would work so well, and it did. I mean, especially the end credit scene where Deadpool shows why, where he was like, "I'm tired of these vile accusations, whatever, whatever."
Yeah.
His delivery on that was so good.
10 out of 10. No notes. And I think at one point Deadpool references that he's not even his favorite Chris, which another internet joke.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it just works so great. It just works so great. Um, yeah, great. It's just again, Deadpool reacting to these different cameos was probably my favorite part, second favorite part of that middle section where they're in the void, because my favorite part was just all the cameos that we get to see because I had no idea what they were going to throw at me. So let's get to what your favorite cameo was, because there's so many to choose from. So hit me with, even if you can't narrow it down to one, give me a couple.
Okay, that's hard. I'm gonna take a second to talk about this because it's just so weird. Like it's just proof we live in the Matrix because just the other day, I'm talking maybe we saw the movie Friday. I want to say Wednesday or Thursday. I was making fun of one of my friends, and I called him the Gambit of the friend group. And he was like, "What are you talking about? Everybody loves Gambit. Gambit's awesome. Gambit's cool." And I was like, "What are you talking about? No, Gambit sucks. Gambit's the worst. His powers stink. His costume's stupid. His hair sucks. Gambit's the worst."
All
And
the
then
Gambit fans out there are just gnashing their teeth right now.
yeah, and to be honest, I don't really know the I don't know how much people really like Gambit or not. I don't know if he's a fan favorite or not. That was just my opinion of him as a character. And then we go get this version of Gambit, and I just felt so justified. I felt very vindicated. It was great. I wanted to punch Channing Tatum in his perfect jaw and break my hand on it. He was just so frustrating and unlikable, but in like a funny way. It was very well done. I also really like the Blade cameo, especially the which Punisher. There's been like five. He goes, but there's only one Blade. That
And there's
was
only
like
going to ever be one Blade.
yeah, that was cool, and I thought they did his character justice. He did. I really liked what they did with him in the short amount of time we had with him. It's hard when you're in a Deadpool movie because everybody sort of exists around him. You can't have Batman in a Deadpool movie, right? It wouldn't work. The dynamic between Deadpool and a character that is serious, the only way that it can work is if they take a step back and sort of just work around Deadpool. But I don't think that had to happen with Blade, even though he's more of a serious character. Um, and I honestly I did not care at all about the new Blade movie coming out, but this had me a little interested. I hope the movie happens now because of this.
Well, I have a question for you about Blade. Did you know that there are three Blade movies?
No, I thought there was one Blade movie, and I haven't seen it.
So I'm going to guess that I know your answer to my follow up question because not only are there three Blade movies, but Ryan Reynolds was in the third Blade movie.
Was he really? That's amazing.
He was. He was. Don't ask me what he did. I just know that he was there. So at one point, Deadpool looks at him, and I think the quote was something like, "Well, you really never liked me anyway," kind of thing. Is I think a reference to that appearance. So
That's great.
I only saw the first Blade movie. I didn't see the second or third. Uh, and that was a long time ago too, so I don't remember a ton of it. But I do know that I'm excited for the Blade movie coming up because I think it's a cool character. It involves vampires, and I've always enjoyed vampire stories and stuff. So we'll see what happens in the future. But he's a cool character, and he's different. He's a very different type of character. The fact that they included him though blew me away. I had no idea whatsoever that he was going. I knew Jennifer Garner was going to be here as Elektra. I had heard and read about that. Been sort of the rumor for a long time, so I wasn't too surprised by that. And it was great to see her back. I never saw the Elektra movie just because the Daredevil movie was not good, and the fact that they referenced that Daredevil's dead, they're like, yeah, Ben Affleck is not coming back for this. There's no way, but we're just gonna explain that he's dead. Um, yeah, so Electro was cool, but Gambit. I wanted to sort of jump onto your comments about Gambit because the fact that they brought Gambit in and that they got Tatum to play him is just so meta because I don't believe it was long after X-Men Origins Wolverine because Gambit is in that movie. You may have forgotten. I had. Taylor Kitsch plays him. The thing was like, oh, we're gonna introduce Gambit, and then if this movie does well, we're gonna do all these different solo character movies, and that never happened because the movie didn't do well. But then shortly after that, there were just these persistent rumors that would never go away for years and years that they were going to make a Gambit movie and that Channing Tatum was going to play Gambit and that he was desperate to play the character. He loved the character. He wanted to play the character. He wanted a movie with the character. And those rumors just never went away. And I remember the big thing was Channing Tatum is going to be terrible at Gambit because there's no way he's going to be able to pull off that accent. So the fact that they brought him in and then made a 5 minute long joke about not being able to understand a word coming out of his mouth
It
was
was
one
great.
of the highlights of the movie for me. So good.
I agree. I loved it. I hated it, but I loved it. This wasn't. a cameo, and I'm glad that it wasn't, but it would have been nice if it was just a little bit. I liked how important Charles Xavier slash Professor X was to this movie.
Yeah, I liked it too.
They
They
never
did him
show
well.
him, but they talk about him a lot. They talk about what he meant to Logan. They talk about sort of there's the line about if Charles knew you were here, he would tear a hole in the universe to come get you, right? Um,
Yep.
Logan wants to be who Charles thought he was all along. He played a very important role in this movie without even being in it. And I think that's just a testament to how well the other two actors have done with him and how important he has been as a character because I it seemed like we talked about earlier, this sort of seemed like a goodbye to the Fox universe, which is fine. Um, it's probably a good thing. But I'm glad that they sort of ended with him on a high note and reminded everybody how important he is.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's a very astute point. Like Charles Xavier's presence was felt even though he was never even in the movie. And that's good. That's a good part of the story. That's also good writing. So and you mentioned the fact that Hugh Jackman really sold it, and he did. That's one of the best parts of the original X-Men trilogy is Wolverine and Charles Xavier storyline. So, yeah, good point. Um, Let me see. The I mean, all the rest of the cameos were fun. We got to see. I think it was cool they brought Ray Park back to be Toad. The Sabretooth fight was hilarious because, like, it's just he just decapitates him, which is the thing that like I'm always asking, like Wolverine, why can't just cut somebody's head off if you can't beat them? Like if you have these long drawn out fights, just cut their head off, and that's exactly what he did. So I thought that was very. And then of course the fact that Lady Deadpool or Lady Pool, I guess is what they call her. Uh, there was persistent rumors about who was going to play the character, and the fact that they never took her mask off, I thought was hilarious. And I almost thought for a second that when we saw her, if she took her mask off, it would be like a digital Ryan Reynolds face on her. But it turns
That
out it was
would be,
Lively, so that was pretty cool that they put Blake Lively in the suit. But then like never saw her face.
yeah, I loved that. I wasn't paying attention to the credits. I probably should have been. And I don't know if this is real or not, but I think I saw a picture of somebody or of the screen that somebody took during the credits, and there were so many different people who played different Deadpools, and I thought that that was great. You don't have to show their face. You People don't even have to really know that they were in it until after the fact. It felt like it felt like a movie that people wanted to be a part of, and
Oh yeah, yeah, I agree.
that means something. You know, when other actors, they don't want to attach their name or put in time and effort into something that's not going to be successful. Their name is their brand, and if you have enough things to flop, you're probably not going to be working for too long. But it's clear that people believed in this movie, and it really paid off.
I agree. It was wildly entertaining. It was just a great time at the movie. At the movie theater, and something I'm looking forward to seeing again. And one of those that you're talking about is Matthew McConaughey. He played the cowboy Deadpool or Cowpool or whatever they call him.
That's great. I love Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, and the fact that they never show their faces, it's just so I don't know if this is something where they were actually in the suit or they just did voiceover for the couple of lines of dialogue, but whatever, they were credited with it, so it's just hilarious. Um, any final thoughts then on Deadpool and Wolverine before we get to the big MCU news out of San Diego Comic Con?
Shout out Dogpool.
Yeah,
Dogpool was the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my life, and I appreciate Dogpool. Dogpool is only the actor for Dogpool is only 7 years old, so they got some time to keep working with Dogpool.
It's great. Just I knew there was going to be an extended scene of Ryan Reynolds being licked inside his mouth by the dog. I just knew it was going to happen, and it did.
That was hard on the eyes.
I also want to shout out Nice Pool, where we got, just he was hilarious. But my
I
favorite
wanted.
part,
I'm so
huh?
glad he died.
The way he died. How quickly can you regenerate? Regenerate? But that wasn't even as funny as when he broke the fourth wall in the worst way possible, and he just looks at the camera and says, "The proposal." I died laughing.
It was great. It was.
It's also one of my favorite non-Deadpool Ryan Reynolds movie. I love that movie. The proposals, so fun, so
I
much fun.
watched it not that long ago. It's a good movie.
Great. Yeah. So I mean, we could go on and on. There's so much to say that we could, but I do want to talk about the Comic Con news that really broke last night, and the big news. That and they gave some love to Brave New World, which I'm really excited about seeing.
It
You know,
looks good.
It looks really good. And they're talking about how they went back to the Winter Soldier roots, and it has that feel. It really does have that feel to it. Um, of course, we didn't see the footage that they played last night, but it is stuff that's has not been out there yet. Then they spent some time on the Thunderbolts. I'm excited about Thunderbolts because I'm a huge David Harbour fan. I loved him as the Red Guardian. I can't wait to see him and Florence Pugh working off each other. I like a lot of the characters in the Thunderbolts movie, so I'm glad to see that that's moving forward. I want to find out what the asterisk is about. Not a lot of ton of news about these films, nor the Fantastic Four, except for the fact that they did add a title. The title is now Fantastic Four: The First Steps, and confirmed that it's sort of like in an alternate reality, futuristic '60s. So my guy Pedro is in that movie, so I'm going to be anticipating it very, very much. But the big news was that the Russo brothers are back to direct Avengers 5, which we now learned is called Doomsday, and Avengers 6, which we knew is Secret War, is still Secret War. Uh, or Secret Wars? Is it Wars or War? I can't remember.
Plural. S.
Oh, Secret Wars. Okay. So that's great news because they have not had one strikeout or one swing and a miss on a Marvel movie that they've been in charge of. So that's great news. The
Closest
bigger
thing would be closest thing would be Age of Ultron, and I think that movie was great.
Oh, but they didn't direct Age of Ultron.
Oh, they didn't. Okay, well,
No.
never
They did
mind.
Winter Soldier and they did Civil War and they did Infinity War and they did Endgame.
I thought they did Ultron. Okay, well, yeah, they are 4 for 4.
Yeah, they are 4 for 4.
They've hit 4 home runs.
So you're excited about them being back?
I am. I am. I think it's great. I I don't know if they went as far as to say it, but I think the understanding was they were only going to come back if they got to do Secret Wars, and the fact that they agreed to do Doomsday and Secret Wars tells me, and they come out within a year of each other, right?
Yeah, a year.
That's the same distance that Infinity War was to Endgame.
That's true. Yeah, yeah.
So
You're right.
um, I think that that's a good thing. I think it means those movies are going to be strong because they have a strong track record. Um, I also think that that puts the pressure on Marvel to make sure that everything is right up until then. They really got to hunker down. They got to make sure that they dot their I's and cross their T's leading up to that because Avengers movies are the culmination of a strong surrounding cast. And if they don't do their job leading up to those movies aren't going to be what they could be.
I don't know a ton about the comics of Secret Wars, but what I do understand, having heard comments from other people and that know what they're talking about, it has the potential to be bigger in scope than Endgame, and that's saying something. And now you have the people that told the Endgame story back to tell this story, and that excites me greatly. But I buried the lead. I've done it now for an hour because I think the bigger news, maybe arguably, is that they revealed and confirmed not only in words but also the man was there. Robert Downey Jr. is going to be playing Victor Von Doom, aka Doctor Doom. So maybe not Victor Von Doom, but Doctor Doom. He came out and was dancing along with a whole bunch of other Doctor Dooms, tore the mask off, and it was Robert Downey Jr. So he's going to be playing Doctor Doom, which we know is a major villain and from the Fantastic Four world. But then they revealed the title. Well, maybe at the same time they revealed the title of Avengers 5, which is going to be Doomsday. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm conflicted. I don't know. Um, this doesn't feel like a recycled actor like Chris Evans was or Michael B. Jordan was, where you can, get something that wasn't great and make it great. Um, Maybe it's still me having a little bit of a distrust of Marvel, but I think having this is, if you miss on this, you're really done. There's no recovering from something like this because you solidified not only a character's legacy or the actor's legacy, but your own legacy with how good Iron Man was and how good his send off was. Now you are, it's funny that this happened in Deadpool. You are digging up that skeleton and you are using it. And if you're going to use it, you better hit, because I'm never gonna say Robert Downey Jr. shouldn't take a role. That the man's an incredible actor and he can do anything. So if he thinks that he can do a good job, I trust him. And if the Russo brothers think that he's the right fit, I trust them. But I'm telling you now, the bar is set extremely high, and it's not something that I would have recommended doing, because you're if you fall on your face with this, you undo everything that you were, in my opinion.
It's a huge risk. It's a huge risk, and I don't know that I could really add anything to what you just said because I had such a similar reaction. What I will do is just sort of uh, share my perspective on that same occurrence, which is I was refreshing Twitter X basically every few minutes, reading the different things coming out of the panel, and when I saw this, like my literal reaction was utter confusion. I was I was very confused. I thought that maybe it was a troll or a joke or something, but no. The first thing I saw was Robert Downey Jr. in the green with the now like it's going to be an iconic picture. Like he's got that serious face and he's holding the Doom mask in his hand, and I'm like, no, this is real. So after having reflected on it for about 12 hours, I thought to myself, I'm stuck. I'm torn. You said torn. I'm going to say stuck. I'm stuck between this may just be so wild that it works, and the other side of that is is this a desperation move by Marvel to try to reclaim some of the previous glory that they've had, and they're hoping RDJ will do it for them, which he absolutely can. And you're right, he's
100%.
not going to fail. He's not going to fail at this role. He's going to absolutely succeed with this role. The question in my mind is the story going to justify this decision? And if they can get the story right, then it could be pretty dang epic. So time will tell on this, and so we'll see. It's
Yeah,
something. It's a risk.
this feels like the red button. It really does. Um, I didn't think that they needed to pull out all the stops to save their franchise. I think it could have just been a gradual retool on the fly. Make a couple adjustments, get a couple strong movies in a row, get a couple good stories, and you got your momentum back because you already have that following. I didn't think they needed to pull out the most drastic measure possible, but I respect that they did. I really do. I mean, they they're setting themselves up either to go back to being the top dog, or they're going to fall flat on their faces. And in my opinion, if you do that with the standards being so high, with Robert Downey Jr. being recast in a different role, um, you're going to be stuck in the mud forever.
Like I said, that's exactly my point. It's a big risk. But I'm going to make a decision. I think I'm just going to do it right here, a snap decision, while we're recording the podcast. I'm an optimist. I believe what you said is true. That the the Russo brothers and the team, and they also have one of the writers from Infinity War and Endgame that's going to come back and write this too. I'm gonna go on record and say I think they're going to make it work, and I think if they do, that Secret Wars has the potential to be even bigger in scope and even more satisfying than Endgame. I'm not gonna say it's gonna be a better movie, but I think it has the ability to revisit those heights. So yeah, I'm just gonna go with that.
So I was going to ask you, since you're putting that pressure on yourself, what does this movie have to do in order for this to be a success?
From what just have a bunch of cool characters. To be quite honest, because that's what Endgame did. It brought the entire MCU universe together to finish off that saga. Well, now we're going through the quote unquote multiverse saga, and I do think that this is sort of confirmation that we're going to continue the multiverse stories, even though Kang's no longer involved, and that's fine. Kang doesn't need to be a part of that multiverse story because is this a Tony Stark variant that's going to be playing Doctor Doom? We don't know. We don't know what the story is going to be, but I do feel like it's going to be the multiverse. And Secret Wars is a culmination of a multiversal disaster, right? Like a potentially catastrophic multiversal disaster. So the scope of that, or the stakes of that, are immediately bigger than the Infinity Saga. But they've gone through and introduced and set precedents through No Way Home and now Deadpool and Wolverine that every player that has been introduced in a Marvel movie, whether it's Fox, Sony, or Disney, could be accessed for Secret Wars. And that excites me greatly because there's a whole lot of mutants out there that could be used. You don't need to use all of them. The are we gonna will the question is, will we see Hugh Jackman as Wolverine and Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield or both with Tom Holland as Spider-Man in an MCU movie? I mean, you got to admit that sounds pretty epic.
It does. It does. It almost sounds like too much. But if you would have told me 2 years before Endgame that they were going to have all these characters, I probably would have said the same thing. So, the like I said before, the thing is, they have to build a strong. They have to have a strong build up to this. You can't just go through the motions and then say, "Here's an amazing movie." They really need to put out a couple really solid projects that get Marvel back on track, because to me, this is the destination. Doomsday and Secret Wars, that is the destination. We are not that far away. I mean, as far as movie timelines go, we are not that far away. There are a lot of stories to tell because we still don't really understand the multiverse. I mean, I'd like to think of myself as a pretty avid Marvel fan, and I have watched pretty much every project they have to put out, and I still don't have a great understanding of it. So if they're going to appeal to the masses, they really have to explain it. They need to make it work. They can't have any convenient storytelling points that get you to where they want to go. There's a lot of work to be done before this.
I agree, and I think that the direction that they're going in now is it's not going to be as long of a process and maybe not as satisfying as the Infinity Saga process, just because that was so focused for so long. This one may be we're going to have a more focused direction, I think, in the next 3 years, because Secret Wars comes out in May 2027. That's less than 3 years from now, right? Am I doing my math right? Yeah, that's less than 3 years. So much is going to
Yep.
happen. But one thing that I think is very telling is that I know that you're not the best person to ask this question, but I'm going to prove my point by it. What's the next Disney Plus Marvel property that's going to be coming out, that's going to be dropping?
I don't know.
Because I don't think there is anything. I don't my I could be wrong on that. I'd have to look it up. I don't know, But you remember the last time Marvel was in Hall H, well, maybe not the last time. It was the one. It's the time before that, 2019, before the pandemic. That's when they rolled out all the Disney Plus properties. Oh, we're getting WandaVision. We're getting Falcon Winter Soldier. We're getting She Hulk. We're getting this. We're getting Moon Knight. We're getting. There has not been one mention of a Disney Plus live action show. We've got some animated stuff coming up. I know that there's going to be a Wakanda series. There's going to be a Spider-Man series. There's going to be What If season 3. It's all animated stuff, which is not going to say it doesn't count, but there is not one. I can't come up with one live action Disney Plus show, and I think that is they're going back to their big movie storytelling model, and I think that that's going to lend itself to more focus, more direction, and better product, because
I
that's what we
agree.
got leading up to the end of the Infinity Saga. So yeah, you're on board with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have the opportunity to do what they wanted to originally. Because in theory, it's not a bad idea to have a bunch of strong movies and then give a moment in the sun to some of the smaller characters
Sure.
by giving them their own shows. I like it in theory because characters like Daredevil, give him his own show, Marvel. Um,
Oh, thank you for reminding me. They do have that is the live action Daredevil. Yeah, Daredevil is coming out at some point. So yeah, I stand corrected. Thank you for reminding me.
um, but characters like that don't have a lot of. There's not a lot for them to do in a world-ending, multiverse-threatening movie. They can't do as much.
Very good point.
So you can still give them their moment in the sun and keep doing what you're doing, but the product has to be worth it. I think and I hope they learned their lesson because if they now go through the next couple years of doing everything right, getting everybody back on board, and then they have an Infinity War slash Endgame 1-2 punch with Doomsday and Secret Wars, then you can go back to the Disney Plus model. Give these guys their shows, tell their stories the way they want to tell them.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. As you were talking, I was looking up what exactly is coming up, and yeah, we do have some live action that I completely forgot about. Don't so I will correct the record, and I won't look like too much of a dum dum. But nothing. My point is the same, that they have not announced anything new that hasn't already been announced. So they're going to finish off what they've announced, which is Agatha All Along, which comes out this fall. There's still an Ironheart series, which I'm assuming is going to happen. There's no release date on that. Of course, we got a couple movies. Then we've got the Daredevil Born Again series, which I don't think that there's a release date yet for that. I guess there's a Wonder Man series that's involved, that's in development. I think that is going forward, and that's it. I think for live action Disney Plus properties, but those were all announced. They haven't announced any more, so I think that the way that they can, I like what you said about having these big grand movie stories that lead to something important, and then filling in some minor gaps with these smaller characters that will not have as much impact in those big grand scales. So yeah, good call. That's the way to do it, right? If you're going to have these kinds of shows, that's the way to do it. That's sort of the Star Wars model. Like, they've filled in gaps with these Disney Plus shows, and they've done it to a pretty successful degree for the most part. So all right, any final thoughts then on Marvel in general?
No, it's a
Fantastic. Well, I wasn't disappointed. Deadpool and Wolverine came through for me. It's the most excited I've been for a Marvel movie in a long time, and it was very satisfying. So it's always fun to talk about something that is satisfying. So we would just hope that you guys all enjoyed it, and hope that you all enjoyed our conversation about it. We'd love to hear what you have to say about it. Let us know what you thought about the movie. Be part of the conversation. Check us out on Twitter, X, Threads, and Instagram, and let us know. We would love to hear what you have to say. So for Luke, this is Colby reminding you, say a prayer for Hugh Jackman, because like Deadpool says, Disney's going to make him do this till he's 90. You can find the Colby Cast on Twitter and Instagram at the Colby Cast. If you're wordy, like me, you can send an email to thecolbycast@gmail.com. Please subscribe to the show and leave a review on your favorite podcast app or wherever you listen to podcasts. This podcast is not endorsed by anyone or anything for that matter. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of the Colby Cast unless otherwise indicated.
That'll do, Donkey. That'll do.